Okay, in this video, we are going to take a look at advanced face replacements using different tools other than DID. So what we're going to do is basically animate this shot. I want it to look realistic, and I want to take the animation of this guy's face and do something unique other than just a typical head tilt that comes from DID. So let's start things off. I'm going to show you every step of the process. So if you get bored, feel free to punch this video into like 1.5 or 2 times speed. But I want to show you the exact pipeline so that you don't get lost if you were to create a similar shot using, similar assets in the future. So let's start things off with Gigapixel. So we want to upres that image. So I'm going to grab that image, drop it into Gigapixel, and the image is currently 816 pixels tall. And if we run it through the system, it will be 3,200 pixels, and that's obviously more than enough. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, cool. And now let's go over to Photoshop and let's open up that upresed image here. So I'm going to go to our files, and we will import our asset here. The high-res asset, we'll import that. So now what we're going to do is isolate this guy in 2 different ways. So the first way is we are going to cut him out from the background. So let's go ahead and just cut this guy out and basically create an isolated background without him. Just like this. You can be rough about it. You don't have to be perfect. Then generative fill and generate. Okay, great. This did a pretty good job. Obviously, some of the characters in the background look a little funny here, but it's not going to matter because he's going to be covering up most of these characters here. So I'm going to stick with, we'll do number 2 here. And let's create another layer where our subject is actually isolated. So we're going to use our quick selection tool here. So we'll go to this tool and go to quick selection. Let's just quickly select our subject. Just like that, and then hold down Option to remove any pieces that don't belong. Just go back and forth here, and that looks pretty good. And now we'll go to Select and Mask, and we will just really quickly, let's click this drop down. I want to see the overlay. So let's really quickly basically take a look at the edges just to clean this up. So everything looks pretty good down here. So yeah, not too bad. There's a little bit of his hat here that we need to incorporate back. It's no problem. Just like that. Cool. Looks pretty good. Just like that. Okay. And let's go ahead and feather out these edges just a little bit. Just dial it up. I'm feathering it at 2.5, which looks pretty good. And then let's go to our hair tool and let's brush over just edges of his hair. Just right there. Just like that. And we'll do the same thing over here, just to the edges of the hair. Just want to incorporate it. And there are some bits here that look a little off. So I'll Option drag and just kind of remove it. Just like that. Add that back in. We'll zoom in here. Just being super rough about it. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. That looks good. And so we're going to make sure we are outputting to a new layer. Click OK. So now we have our subject over a background. So let's go ahead and save these separately. So I'm going to export this single image of this subject. So to go to File, Export, Quick Export as PNG. And we'll drop this into our folder here, and I'll just say Isolated Subject. And then we will do the exact opposite for the background. So we'll turn on the 2 bottom layers here, go to File, Export as PNG, and we'll say Background. And click Save. Okay, great. So now it's time to add in some animation to our subject. And to do that, I'm going to use a brand new tool. This is called MyHeritage. So we'll go to myheritage.com. And you can sign in, create a new account. There is a free trial to where you can test out some of these images. So I'm going to import our super high-res image that has the background and the subject in the foreground here. And we will drag and drop it into MyHeritage. And so now what I'm going to do is select our image here. Just double click on it. And let's go to this animate button. Click animate, and it's going to look for faces in our scene. It's probably going to find multiple faces, but I only want to animate this front face here. And it will give you a list of faces to animate. It's really good about finding different faces. I guess hypothetically we could animate every single face inside of this frame if we wanted to, but I'm going to stick with our main subject here. And we can see that this animation, he's just looking around, smiling, just creates some more lifelike animations that look real. And the cool thing is in MyHeritage, so this is animation number 2, they have all sorts of animation styles that you can pick from. So we can select this other one, and it'll take just a few moments, and it will basically output the animation. So go ahead and play around with these and find the one that you are looking for. For our example, I'm going to use this kiss and wink effect, and I'm going to hit download to download the footage. So by default, when you download the footage, it's going to be in a pretty low res format here. So this is only 3.1 megabytes, pretty small. We actually want to up-res that. So let's go over here to Topaz Video AI. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this guy here. And let's add in our footage from MyHeritage. And I'm going to change this to a ×4 upscale, which will give us as much resolution as we need. And instead of 20 frames per second, which doesn't make any sense at all, I'm going to change this to 24 frames per second. And the frame interpolation, we can change to Apollo. I find that it does a good job. We'll replace duplicate frames, and the sensitivity can be at 10. That's totally fine. And I'll turn down the recover original detail. And when you're ready, hit the export button to process this footage. Ooh, Caleb exports the video. Okay, so we have our high-res footage of our character looking around, looking at the camera. All right, kiss and wink. All right. So now we basically need to remove the background, because if we tried copying this square image over the frame, it would come across as square, there'd be harsh edges, and it really would not sell the scene very much at all. In order to do that, we're going to go to Runway, and we will use the background remover tool that we used in the previous video. Let's go to background remover, and let's drag and drop our footage. So now we will select our subject. So we'll just select his forehead here, see how well it does. It did pretty well. And let's go ahead and go to exclude here, and we will exclude this kind of corner here because it's not quite his hair. Great. So this looks pretty good. I like this selection here, and let's go to done masking. Now it will remove the background. Great. And I will go ahead and I'll feather out those edges just a little bit. There. And now we will click export. And we'll export, we can do the 4K format. We're going to scale this down. It's going to get nice and sharp whenever it's the actual size of the composition. And I will set this to an MP4 format. You can use ProRes if you want to get all of that crystal clear detail, but we'll just do the MP4 for now. And remember to actually download the footage. You just go to your projects panel. So just go back to projects and go to assets. And then your footage will be right in here whenever it is done exporting. And we'll go ahead and download that to our computer. Okay, so now it's time to bring all of these elements into After Effects. I'm going to select our background image that's high res, going to select our isolated face video, and then our isolated subject here. So let's grab all three of those assets and drop them into a new composition. So let's grab all of these assets and then drop them into After Effects. So I'm going to create a new composition. We'll go to Composition, New Composition, and we'll set this to be HD 24 frames per second. Click OK. And let's drop in our background first. So we want the background to be in the very back. We'll scale this to, we'll say 34%. And then we'll drop in our isolated subject right on top. And again, scale it to 34%. So now essentially we have our initial image just scaled down, but again, we can isolate our subject and turn him on and off like this. Cool. So now I also want to add in the video footage of the guy with an animated face. Now, I don't want to use all of this video. I only want to use kind of the ending part where he kind of blows the kiss and winks. Super weird. I'm going to basically set an out point there, and then we'll kind of scrub over to here and set an end point. And now we can actually hit this overlay edit. And when we do that, it basically is going to drop the footage at that endpoint into the timeline. And I'll just expand that out there. Cool. So obviously his head is like gigantic right now, way too big. So I'm going to click S for scale, and we're going to scale him down. And I'm going to hit T for opacity. So that kind of had this onion skin example here. And we're going to basically move the anchor point. So we're going to go to this move anchor point tool here. You can click Y to select it. And let's make sure we change the anchor point to be some point that we can really scale behind. So in our case, I'm going to select this part of his shirt, this kind of pointed part where his collar comes together. So we'll just scale around that collar part. And I'll hit T for opacity, and let's line it up perfectly with the underneath image where the point where his collar is basically going to scale under. And now what we can do is hit S for scale. And as we scale him down, he basically is going to scale around that point. So once we get it almost where we want it, we can hold down the edges, hold down Shift to scale proportionally, and we'll just make sure that he scales down pretty close to where we want him to be. I'll hit T for opacity and then scale him up. So there's his head. Right? Just like this. So obviously, right now, he is just a square head over top of an image, but if we go ahead and scrub through, you can see, kind of looks at the camera, blinks. Okay. Oh, this whole song and dance here. All right. So let's do a little bit of work here. The first thing that I want to do is remove the backgrounds, and we can do that really easily if we just go to the effects and preset browser, type in key for key light. I'll drop it onto the subject here, select the green, and boom, it's gone. Because it was like that real nice green screen background, we don't really have to do any cleanup. It looks really crystal clear. And it did a pretty good job. But now we basically need to go in and kind of cut around some of these edges that are creating this harsh distinction between the footage that we have in the background and the actual subject. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn off our background. So the background layer is turned off, and let's go ahead and select the foreground video. And I want to essentially, let's just go in here with our pen tool. It's going to cut out our subject about like this. And I'm going to leave quite a lot of wiggle room here on the edges, so that whenever we feather out the edges, they don't get cut off. And I'm going to hit F for feather. We'll just feather it out quite a bit here. So I feathered it to almost 200. You can see that it did a pretty good job at smoothing this edge over here. And then obviously we'll take care of the background in just a second. Okay, move this one in a little. Cool. So right there, like that frame alone looks pretty realistic, but the problem is his whole head is right behind this head. So we actually need to cut out this head here. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the top layer. So that top layer eyedropper is turned off. Now I'm going to go in here and I will select the isolated subject image, this one, and with just the character by himself here. And we'll go in and kind of cut out the exact opposite of what we added in just a second ago. So I'm just going to cut out his head here. It's going to be a little graphic. And let's change the mask. So I'm going to click this mask and we're going to change it from add to subtract. And let's turn on the top layer there and take a look at what we have. So we have basically the background, and then we have the foreground. And this background, I want to feather it out. So I'm going to select the mask on the isolated background with the isolated subject. We'll feather it out, and we can just adjust the edges as we see fit here. About like that. Turn it down. Okay, cool. So we have our subject, with a face comp, and we can scrub through and see our subject moving his head. Now, one of the problems, and we're going to fix this in just a second, is the fact that as our subject moves his head around, you see that the background, like the hair in the background, for example, doesn't exactly line up with the movement. And his collar, for example, the movement kind of is a little off, right? Like it looks fine like here, but then it starts moving around and like there's like some weird distortion going on. Well, what I want to do is actually use the puppet tool to move the subject's body to line up with this head movement. So it's a little advanced, but I think we'll be able to get it done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our puppet pin here, and let's select a few different points. So I'm going to select the bottom of his collar. We'll select maybe the top of his collar, kind of the both edges here, maybe the edge of his hair over here, maybe the edge of his hair here, and then maybe both shoulder joints here. And maybe, let's say, like the middle of his stomach here, kind of halfway between his chest and his stomach there. Okay, so now let's go in and animate this. So let's click the drop-down menu here, and we'll go to our puppet and go to the mesh. And now we have all of our puppets here. So now we can adjust these to basically animate. So if you hit U, you'll basically see every keyframe that has been adjusted for that layer. And again, I'm on the second layer here. And what we can do is let's scrub through and see if we can't match the foreground, the face, with the background. So we're only going to move the background to try to match the face. So I'm going to so let's scrub through here and see any parts that begin to look like they're getting a little off. So I'm going to scrub, kind of zoom in here. And you can see that this part here, especially if I hit T for opacity and scrub it down, you can see that it's a little off, like the collar isn't extending all the way there. That's no problem. We can just grab the edge here. Just move it up there. That looks pretty good. We'll scrub through here. And again, it seems a little off there, so I'll move this over. About there. And it's really a back and forth process. It's going to take a little bit of work to just adjust everything so that it lines up perfectly and looks good. But it's definitely worth it. So that looks pretty good right there. And we'll scrub forward. Just looking for anything that feels wonky in our scene here. I think that looks pretty good. And I can see that when his head shifts at the beginning, you see how the hair is shifting out of frame? Let me zoom in there. See how his hair is shifting out here? We'll want to adjust that. So let's find the point before it moves over. Out there. And let's set a keyframe for that puppet number 5. Just that one right there. Again, this is just going to be entirely dependent on your own project and just kind of where you set the puppet pins. And we'll grab this edge here. Let's drag that out to there. So now his hair moves in. You see it tracks with the movement. Looks much more natural. And let's take a look over here. I think we have a similar issue. So we track forward. And at this point, I think so this is puppet number 4. I think it should move in a little bit. Let's track to the beginning. Again, this pin, probably adjust it over a little bit more. About there. Let's move it over. And it's good at the end, but I think right here, it's still a little off. And again, it's just a back and forth process. You can get as detailed or as casual as you want. And I'm going to turn up the opacity of the face here. So let's take a look at what we have so far. We have our subject. He's looking around. It looks pretty good. Great. And now the only part that's a little weird is at the very end, his hair on the right side kind of grows whenever it doesn't really feel like it should be growing there. So I'm going to go to our puppet pin number 4, and I'm just going to delete that last keyframe. Cool. Just like that. So now let's turn our background back on here, and I'm going to trim the comp to where it's just the part where our character's face is moving forwards and back. And let's go ahead and preview this. So I'm going to hit 0 on my number pad to preview. Okay. So you can see he's looking at the camera there. It looks pretty good. The movement on the hair, it feels pretty natural. You could go in and you could puppet tool it a little bit more if you wanted to. But I think it looks pretty natural. And the background is showing up through the scene here. It's not, there's no like weird clipping or static or anything like that. So it looks pretty darn good. Now, really quickly, I just want to show you how we could add movement to this. So I'm going to turn all of these layers into 3D here. And let's push that background. I'm going to hit P for position. We're just going to push it backwards quite a ways. Then hit S for scale and scale it up about there. And let's create a new camera. So we'll go to Layer, New Camera. Click OK. And you can see when we created that new camera, it kind of scaled up the background just a little bit. That's fine. We can just scale down the background to where we need it to be. About like that. And let's go ahead and set a keyframe here at the very beginning. So I'm going to go to Transform on the camera. We'll set a keyframe for position and point of interest. I'll move forward. And for this one, let's do just a slow push in. About like that. And maybe even a tilt down. We'll adjust the point of interest to go down a little bit. And maybe the position goes to the left just a little. So you can see he's just looking at the camera. Kisses. Great. And then his head goes away. Very scared. Now, one thing that I also want to do is make sure that we are parallaxing sides here. So you guessed it. I'm going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. And let's go to our Effects and Presets browser. I'm going to type in Lens for a lens adjustment here. And let's drop this below our main subject. We're going to put it above the background. Scale this up to 500. Set a keyframe, move forward in time, and then I'm going to turn up the distortion, or turn down the distortion rather. Like that. So now if we scrub through, it looks like the edges here are getting blurred in a realistic way. So let's go ahead and preview everything that we have now. Okay, great. This looks pretty good. And again, you could take this even further if you wanted to use a depth map with the background and, have like a cool camera movement where it's like tilting down. All of those options are completely available to you. But hopefully you'll be able to use the MyHeritage tool to just push those character animations just one step further as you progress in your AI filmmaking journey.